You're watching the Rails3 screencast. I'm Greg Pollock, and in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at bundler and the new action mailer syntax. Now, before we get into it, we need to talk a little bit about dependency management and how we previously did this with Rails 2. In Rails 2, to specify what gems our application depended on, we would put them inside our environment.rb file. If we downloaded a new Rails application to make sure we had those gems, we might run rake gems install. And lastly, when we were ready to deploy, we might run rake gems unpack, which is going to unpack all these gems into our vendor gems directory. So let's take a look at why the dependency resolution was so bad. Well, here we have an application. It depends on Active Merchant 1.4.2 and Rails 3.2, and you can see listed under each of these the dependencies. Here's all of our system gems, and here's our Rails app. So we're ready to load. First, it's going to look at each dependency one at a time. Here's Active Merchant 1.4.2, require that. That requires active support 2.3.2 or greater. Okay, require 2.3.3. Okay, now let's go to Rails 2.3.2. Oh, that means we need, we've bugged out. We can't load Rails 2.3.2 because we already have 2.3.3 loaded. That's not good, and we get an error. Bundler fixes this dependency issue, but before we get into it, let's look at the bundler commands. We specify our gems inside the gem file, which gets created for us by Rails 3 in our root folder. We then run bundle when we want to fetch, download, and install or compile these gems from our gem file. And when our application is ready for production, we would run bundle package to take our libraries and unpack them into vendor cache. Now, if we look back at our dependency resolution problem, with bundler we don't have these issues. All of our dependencies get evaluated at once, the proper versions of gems get included, and we don't have errors like we did previously. Now, if you're wondering what bundler is doing under the covers for dependency resolution, it's basically doing a depth-first search. You might have to think back to your college days for this one. So it's going to the leftmost tree and slowly working over to the right. If at any point it finds a conflict, it's going to jump back and try to find a gem that's compatible with both libraries. It's then going to have to go through and make sure if it changes the gem version, that the new gem is then compatible with all of the child dependencies. It's definitely not simple code. If you want to see some advanced Ruby programming, check out the bundler source. As I mentioned earlier, with bundler we specify all our gem dependencies inside of our gem file. Here's what it might look like. We can specify the source, where we're getting our gems from. We can specify a gem and what to require, if it's going to be in a Git repository. If we're storing a gem in our local path, we can do that too. We can also specify a Git repo, which might have a series of gems which we want to install. Obviously, the Git repo would need to have the gem spec for each of those gems. And lastly, we can wrap gems in a group. So for this example, we're only going to be loading WebRat when we're in the test environment. So once we've created our gem file, we can run bundle, which will ensure that all the gems are installed. If they're not, it's going to go out to Ruby gems and install them. It's worth noting that it's also going to include WebRat, but it's going to only require that in test mode. If we didn't want to install WebRat on our production server, then we could do bundle without test, and it wouldn't install it. Now let's take a look at a couple other bundler commands. We've got bundle check, which will make sure all of our dependencies are available for the gem file. We'll do bundle show, which will show the libraries included by the gem file. We can do bundle show any specific gem, which will show where it's located in our file system, where it got installed. And conveniently, we can also do bundle open, which will open the source of that gem inside of our default text editor. So to summarize, when I download a new application locally, I'm going to run bundle to make sure I have all the dependencies. When I want to deploy my application, I'm going to run bundle on my server. You might want to add this to your Capistrano task. And when my application is ready for production, I'm going to want to take a look inside my application folder for gemfile.lock. This file specifies the exact gem versions my application is running. I'm going to want to take this file, make sure that I get it into source control, and then when I deploy on the server, I'm going to run bundle. This is going to look in our gemfile.lock file and install exactly the versions of the gems that our application needs. Let's go ahead and take a look inside a gem file in a gemfile.lock file. So in our gem file, if we have these two gem dependencies, inside of our gemfile.lock, we're going to see that it's including specific versions of those gems and specifying what those gems depend on. If I want to add a new gem to my application, let's say SQLite3-Ruby, I enter it in my gem file. The next time I run bundle, it's going to automatically add SQLite3-Ruby to my gemfile.lock. What if a new version of Nokogiri gets released, 1.4.1, and I'm currently running 1.4.0? Well, if I run bundle again, it's not going to install it because it's simply going to be looking at the gemfile.lock. This is what it's supposed to do. If I want to have it update the version of Nokogiri, I can run bundle update. This is going to recreate the gemfile.lock and run bundle to install new dependencies, and Nokogiri 1.4.1 will be entered into my gemfile.lock. I can also run bundle update Nokogiri, which will update only that dependency in my gemlock file. Now, when I'm ready to deploy my application, but I don't want my production server to depend on external gem servers, what I might do is run bundle package, which is going to take all the gem source and put that into my vendor cache directory, which I can then commit into source control. Then on the server, I still need to have it run bundle. That's going to install the gems from my vendor cache directory into the system, and my deployment will run. In Rails 3, Action Mailer has been completely refactored. Previously, it was using the Tmail gem, but now it's been rewritten to use the Mail gem. All of this is the work of Michael Linsar. Previously in Rails 2, when we wanted to create a new mailer, we would run script generate mailer, user mailer, maybe we have a welcome email and a forgot password email. That would create a user_mailer.rb inside the models directory. With Rails 3, we of course use the new syntax for our scripts, Rails space G, and the rest of it's basically the same. Except it's going to create a file in the mailers directory. This is a great new intelligent default in Rails 3. If you don't have a mailers directory when you run this command, it's going to create one for you. I don't know about you, but in Rails 2, I was already separating my mailers into the mailers directory and the models into the models directory, and now Rails 3 does that by default. The syntax for creating and sending mail has changed in Rails 3 as well. In Rails 2, mail creation might look something like so. We would send this email by doing user mailer deliver welcome. And now in Rails 3, creating an email looks slightly different. In Rails 3, creating an email has an improved syntax. You can see here we set instance variables to store data which we're going to use to render our emails. And we use the mail method to specify options about sending our email. To deliver email, we now would call user mailer welcome user subdomain dot deliver. It's a slightly improved syntax. There are a bunch of new options we can use inside user mailer, starting with the ability to specify intelligent defaults. So we might specify the from address across all of our mailers, the reply to. We can even specify headers such as the timecode. It's also become a lot easier to attach files to mail. You'll notice here we don't even have to specify the MIME type. Rails is going to figure that out all on its own. Lastly, if we want to specify different templates for the email, maybe a different HTML template, a different text template, we can specify them here in a do format block. Of course, we'd only specify this if we didn't want to stick with the defaults. So if we already have a welcome.text.erb, a welcome.html.erb file, we don't have to specify this format block. It's going to properly create a multi-part email for us. For additional information on these two topics, if you're looking for more info on Bundler, go to gembundler.com. For more information about Action Mailer, check out the Rails guide. Thanks for watching.